Welcome to the Buddhist audio bookshelf. Today, we're diving into the wheel of the mind, understanding the power of thought through the Dhammapada. Join us on this enlightening journey. If you appreciate the Buddha's teachings, please help us share this wisdom by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Thank you for being with us. The wheel of the mind, understanding the power of thought through the Dhammapada. The mind is the source of all. The Dhammapada, a central text in the Buddhist tradition, offers a deep well of wisdom that transcends time and place. It is a collection of verses spoken by the Buddha himself, encapsulating his teachings on ethics, mental discipline, and wisdom. The power of these verses lies in their simplicity and directness, yet they speak to the most profound truths of human existence. Among the many verses, one stands out for its timeless insight into the nature of the mind and the role it plays in shaping our reality. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief, they are all mind-wrought. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. This verse, from the opening chapter of the Dhammapada, serves as a foundation for understanding the core of Buddhist teachings, the power of the mind. It asserts a simple but transformative truth, that our thoughts govern our experiences. Everything we say or do begins in the mind. Whether we act out of kindness or cruelty, wisdom or ignorance, the mind is the driving force behind all our actions. And depending on whether the mind is pure or impure, the consequences that follow can either bring happiness or suffering. To understand the significance of this verse, it helps to first appreciate the Buddhist concept of karma. In Buddhism, karma refers to the law of cause and effect, which governs all actions and their consequences. What we think, say, and do generates karma, which, in turn, shapes our future experiences. An impure mind leads to actions that generate negative karma, resulting in suffering. In contrast, a pure mind leads to wholesome actions, creating positive karma and bringing happiness and peace. The verse uses a powerful metaphor to describe the inevitability of suffering that arises from an impure mind. Suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. This imagery is striking in its clarity. Just as the wheel of a cart follows the ox that pulls it, so too does suffering follow a person whose actions are born from greed, anger, or ignorance. There is no escape from the consequences of an impure mind, just as the ox cannot escape the wheel behind it. But the Buddha's teachings are not meant to be fatalistic. They do not suggest that we are doomed to suffer if we have negative thoughts or emotions. Instead, the Dhammapada invites us to recognize the power we have over our own minds. By learning to purify the mind, we can free ourselves from the cycle of suffering and move toward liberation, or nibbana. In this sense, the mind is both the source of our suffering and the key to our freedom. This introduction will explore the layers of meaning behind this verse, beginning with an understanding of the mind as the creator of our reality. We will then examine the consequences of an impure mind, the practices that help purify the mind, and finally, how to apply this wisdom in daily life. Through these reflections, we will see that the teachings of the Buddha are not abstract or theoretical, they are practical, actionable, and deeply relevant to the challenges we face in modern life. The mind is the creator of reality. In Buddhist philosophy, the mind is regarded as the most powerful force in shaping human experience. This belief is expressed clearly in the opening lines of the Dhammapada. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief, they are all mind-wrought. What the Buddha is saying here is that every experience we have, whether it is joyful, painful, or neutral, arises from the mind. The quality of our thoughts determines the quality of our lives. To understand this, let's think about how our thoughts influence our perception of the world. Imagine waking up in the morning feeling anxious or frustrated. As you go about your day, everything seems to irritate you, the traffic is unbearable, your coworkers are difficult, and even small inconveniences feel like monumental problems. Now, contrast this with a day when you wake up feeling calm and content. The very same events, traffic, work, daily challenges, are much easier to handle. What has changed? Not the external circumstances, but your mental state. The mind has the power to color your perception, making the world seem either hostile or welcoming, depending on the thoughts you cultivate. This is not to say that external events have no influence on us, but the Buddha emphasizes that our mental reactions are what determine whether we suffer or thrive. The mind, in this sense, is like a lens through which we view the world. If the lens is clouded by negative emotions like anger, greed, or jealousy, everything we see will be distorted. On the other hand, if the lens is clear, free from these mental defilements, we can see the world as it truly is, and our actions will be guided by wisdom and compassion. Buddhist teachings often use metaphors to illustrate this concept of mental creation. One powerful analogy is that of the mind as a field, and our thoughts as seeds. Just as a farmer plants seeds in a field, we plant thoughts in the mind. If we plant seeds of greed, hatred, and ignorance, we will reap a harvest of suffering. If we plant seeds of love, compassion, and mindfulness, we will enjoy a life filled with peace and happiness. The Buddha invites us to take responsibility for the seeds we plant, knowing that the quality of our lives depends on the quality of our thoughts. But how do these thoughts become actions, and how do actions lead to the consequences we experience? This brings us to the next part of the verse, which explores the consequences of an impure mind. The consequences of an impure mind. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. In this line, the Buddha warns us about the inevitable consequences of actions born from an impure mind. An impure mind is one that is clouded by negative mental states, often referred to as kleshas in Buddhist philosophy. These include greed, hatred, jealousy, and ignorance, emotions and thoughts that distort our perception of reality and lead to harmful actions. The metaphor of the ox and the wheel is particularly powerful because it highlights the inescapability of karma. Just as the ox cannot avoid the wheel of the cart that follows behind it, so too can we not escape the consequences of our actions. When we act out of anger or selfishness, we create suffering for ourselves and others. This suffering may not always be immediate, but it is inevitable. Consider the example of someone who speaks out of anger. In the heat of the moment, harsh words are said, perhaps to a friend, family member, or colleague. While the anger may dissipate after a few moments, the impact of those words lingers. The relationship may be damaged, trust may be lost, and both parties may feel hurt or resentment. The suffering that follows, like the wheel of the ox's cart, continues long after the initial moment of anger has passed. This is the nature of karma. Every thought, word, and action sets into motion a chain of consequences that return to us, either in this life or in future lives. When we act with an impure mind, the consequences are often painful: broken relationships, inner turmoil, and a sense of disconnection from ourselves and others. But this cycle of suffering is not inevitable. The Buddha's teachings offer a way out, a path to purifying the mind and breaking free from the wheel of suffering. Purifying the mind. If an impure mind leads to suffering, then the path to happiness and peace lies in cultivating a pure mind. A pure mind is one that is free from the defilements of greed, hatred, and delusion. Instead, it is filled with qualities like loving kindness, compassion, mindfulness, and wisdom. The Buddha provided numerous teachings and practices to help us purify the mind. Among the most important is the practice of mindfulness, or sati in Pali. Mindfulness involves being fully present in the moment, observing our thoughts and emotions without attachment or judgment. By cultivating mindfulness, we can become aware of negative thoughts as they arise, allowing us to stop them before they lead to harmful actions. In addition to mindfulness, meditation plays a crucial role in purifying the mind. Through meditation, we can train the mind to remain calm and centered, even in the face of life's challenges. Meditation helps us develop insight into the nature of our thoughts and emotions, allowing us to see them for what they truly are, temporary and impermanent. When we realize that our negative emotions are not fixed parts of who we are, we can begin to let go of them. Another important practice is the cultivation of loving kindness, or metta. In metta meditation, we focus on sending thoughts of love and compassion to ourselves and others. This practice helps to counteract the negative emotions of anger and hatred, replacing them with feelings of goodwill and connection. But purifying the mind is not just about what we do in meditation. It also involves living a life guided by ethical principles. The Buddha taught that ethical conduct is essential for mental purity. The 5 precepts, abstaining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and intoxication, provide a framework for living in a way that supports mental clarity and peace. When we live ethically, we reduce the disturbances in our mind and create the conditions for deeper mindfulness and meditation. Applying the teachings in daily life. The teachings of the Buddha are not meant to be reserved for times of meditation or study. They are meant to be lived and applied in every aspect of our daily lives. The verse from the Dhammapada offers a simple but profound framework for making wise choices in our thoughts, words, and actions. Mindful speech and action. Each time we speak or act, we have the opportunity to choose whether we will contribute to suffering or peace. By practicing mindful speech, speaking truthfully, kindly, and with purpose, we can avoid the harm caused by gossip, harsh words, or lies. Similarly, by acting with compassion and integrity, we contribute to a world where suffering is diminished. Daily meditation practice. Even a few minutes of meditation each day can help us cultivate a pure mind. By setting aside time to quiet the mind, reflect on our thoughts, and cultivate positive emotions, we create the conditions for long-term peace and happiness. The power of the mind. The teachings of the Dhammapada remind us of the incredible power of the mind. Our thoughts shape our reality, and by transforming our minds, we can transform our lives. The journey to a pure mind is not easy, but it is the path to liberation from suffering. As we walk this path, we come to realize that true happiness and peace are not found in external circumstances, but within the clarity and purity of our own minds. This verse from the Dhammapada offers a profound reminder of the importance of cultivating a pure mind. By doing so, we can break free from the wheel of suffering and move toward a life of peace, wisdom, and compassion. The teachings of the Buddha show us that the mind is both the source of our suffering and the key to our freedom. Through mindfulness, meditation, and ethical living, we can purify the mind and create a life that is not only free from suffering but filled with joy, peace, and a deep sense of connection to all beings. The mind is the creator of reality. In Buddhism, the mind is often referred to as the source of all our experiences. Whether it is joy or sorrow, tranquility or chaos, every state of being begins in the mind. This central tenet of Buddhist philosophy is encapsulated in the first verse of the Dhammapada, which states, "Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief, they are all mind-wrought." In these few words, the Buddha offers a profound insight. Our thoughts, more than any external circumstances, shape the way we experience the world. This simple yet powerful truth invites us to reflect on how we engage with our own minds. How do we respond to the thoughts and emotions that arise within us? Do we allow ourselves to be carried away by them, or do we recognize our capacity to shape them? Most of us spend our lives reacting to situations, unaware of how much control we have over our mental states. The Buddha teaches that the key to transforming our lives lies in mastering our minds. The power of thought. To understand how the mind shapes reality, it's essential to first understand the nature of thought. Thoughts are not isolated or random occurrences. They are the building blocks of our perception, emotions, and actions. Every decision we make, every feeling we experience, and every action we take begins with a thought. Over time, these thoughts accumulate, forming patterns and habits that shape the course of our lives. In essence, our minds create our reality. If we believe the world is full of threats and danger, we will act in ways that confirm that belief, perhaps by isolating ourselves from others or becoming defensive in our relationships. On the other hand, if we see the world as a place of potential and kindness, we will approach life with openness, attracting positive experiences and forming meaningful connections. Take, for example, someone who views the world through a lens of fear. Every new situation is perceived as a potential threat, every person is a potential adversary. This mindset leads to anxiety, mistrust, and withdrawal from social interactions. Over time, this person's world becomes smaller and more isolated, reinforcing their belief that the world is a dangerous place. In contrast, someone who approaches life with confidence and optimism is more likely to see challenges as opportunities and to seek out positive relationships. Their reality reflects their mental state, filled with opportunities and supportive connections. The Buddha recognized this power of thought long before modern psychology. In contemporary terms, we might liken it to cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, a psychological approach that helps individuals recognize and change negative thought patterns. Both CBT and the Buddha's teachings acknowledge that our thoughts shape our perceptions of reality. The key, as the Buddha emphasized, is that the mind can be trained to shift from negative to positive thought patterns, thereby transforming our experience of the world. The mind is the source of suffering. The Dhammapada verse continues with a warning: if with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. This metaphor illustrates the inevitable consequences of our thoughts. Just as an ox pulling a cart cannot escape the wheel that follows behind it, a person cannot escape the suffering that results from impure thoughts and actions. An impure mind is one that is dominated by negative emotions such as anger, greed, jealousy, and hatred. These mental states distort our perception of reality and lead to actions that cause harm, both to ourselves and to others. When we act from a place of negativity, we create suffering in our lives, just as the ox creates grooves in the ground with each step, dragging the heavy cart behind it. To understand how an impure mind leads to suffering, let's consider the emotion of anger. Anger is a powerful and destructive force that can take control of our minds, blinding us to reason and compassion. When we are angry, we may lash out at others, say things we later regret, or make rash decisions that have long-lasting consequences. Even after the anger subsides, the damage it causes remains: strained relationships, hurt feelings, and a sense of guilt or shame. The suffering that follows anger, like the ox's wheel, is inevitable and difficult to undo. Similarly, greed and jealousy create a sense of constant dissatisfaction. When we are consumed by desire, whether for material wealth, recognition, or power, we are never content with what we have. Our minds are always focused on what is lacking, on what others have that we do not. This endless craving leads to a life of comparison, envy, and inner turmoil. No matter how much we acquire, it is never enough. The suffering that follows greed is a life of unfulfilled desires and restless dissatisfaction. The Buddha's teachings on suffering go beyond personal experiences. When our actions are driven by impure thoughts, they also harm those around us. A person acting out of greed may exploit others for personal gain, damaging relationships and causing harm to entire communities. A person acting out of anger may spread discord and violence, leading to conflict and division. The suffering caused by an impure mind ripples outward, affecting not only the individual but also the broader world. Shifting our perspective. The good news is that the Buddha did not teach that suffering is inevitable. While impure thoughts may lead to suffering, we are not condemned to live in a cycle of negativity. The mind can be trained, purified, and transformed. By recognizing the nature of our thoughts and learning to direct them wisely, we can break free from the wheel of suffering and create a life of peace and happiness. The first step in this process is mindfulness. Mindfulness, or the practice of being fully present and aware of our thoughts and emotions, allows us to observe our mental states without judgment. Rather than being swept away by anger or jealousy, we can notice these emotions as they arise and choose how to respond to them. By cultivating mindfulness, we gain the ability to pause, reflect, and act from a place of clarity rather than from a place of reactivity. Mindfulness teaches us that thoughts and emotions are temporary and impermanent. They arise, persist for a time, and eventually fade away. By observing our thoughts without attachment, we begin to realize that we are not our thoughts. We can experience anger without becoming consumed by it. We can feel desire without being driven by it. This realization is liberating because it allows us to respond to life's challenges with wisdom rather than with habitual reactivity. In addition to mindfulness, the Buddha also emphasized the importance of right intention as part of the Eightfold Path. Right intention involves cultivating positive mental states such as loving kindness, compassion, and altruism. When our intentions are pure, our thoughts, words, and actions naturally follow suit. A person who approaches life with the intention of kindness and compassion will act in ways that promote harmony and well-being, both for themselves and for others. Sowing seeds of purity. Just as impure thoughts lead to suffering, pure thoughts lead to peace and happiness. By cultivating positive mental states, we create a life of harmony, contentment, and fulfillment. This is the essence of the Buddha's teaching. We have the power to shape our reality by shaping our minds. Returning to the analogy of the farmer, imagine a person who carefully tends to their mental garden. They plant seeds of kindness, compassion, and wisdom, and they diligently weed out negative thoughts such as anger, greed, and jealousy. Over time, their mental garden flourishes, filled with the fruits of peace, love, and joy. This is the result of a mind that has been purified and trained to focus on positive, wholesome thoughts. One of the most effective ways to cultivate a pure mind is through the practice of metta, loving-kindness meditation. In this form of meditation, we focus on sending love and compassion to ourselves and others. We begin by wishing ourselves well, saying phrases such as, "May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be free from suffering." We then extend these wishes to others, first to our loved ones, then to neutral individuals, and finally to those with whom we have conflict. This practice helps to soften the mind, replacing negative emotions with feelings of compassion and goodwill. Over time, it becomes easier to respond to life's challenges with kindness rather than with anger or resentment. By regularly practicing metta meditation, we can purify our minds and create a life that is free from the suffering that follows an impure mind. The ripple effect of a pure mind. Just as an impure mind spreads suffering, a pure mind spreads peace and happiness. When we act from a place of kindness, compassion, and wisdom, we create positive ripples that extend beyond ourselves. Our actions contribute to the well-being of those around us, creating a more harmonious and compassionate world. Imagine a person who consistently practices mindfulness and metta meditation. In their daily interactions, they approach others with patience, understanding, and kindness. When faced with conflict, they remain calm and seek peaceful solutions. Their presence brings a sense of ease and comfort to those around them. Over time, their positive actions inspire others to act with kindness and compassion, creating a ripple effect of goodness in the world. This is the power of a pure mind. It not only transforms our own lives but also contributes to the well-being of others. By cultivating positive thoughts and intentions, we become a force for good in the world, spreading peace, love, and joy wherever we go. The mind is indeed the creator of reality. Our thoughts shape our experiences, for better or worse. By recognizing the power of our minds and learning to cultivate positive mental states, we can break free from the cycle of suffering and create a life of peace and happiness. Through mindfulness, meditation, and right intention, we can transform our minds and, in doing so, transform our world. The consequences of an impure mind. In the Buddha's teachings, the mind is the foundation of everything we experience. The Dhammapada states, "If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox." This verse illustrates the profound consequences of an impure mind. An impure mind is not just an abstract concept, It manifests through negative thoughts, emotions, and actions that shape our reality. When our minds are clouded by defilements such as greed, hatred, and delusion, suffering becomes inevitable. It is this suffering that follows us persistently, just as the ox cannot escape the cart it pulls. In this chapter, we will explore the nature of an impure mind, the mechanics of how it generates suffering, and how we can begin to free ourselves from this cycle. The nature of an impure mind. To understand the consequences of an impure mind, we must first grasp what constitutes mental impurity. According to Buddhist philosophy, the primary defilements that lead to an impure mind are greed, lobha, hatred, dosa, and delusion, moha. These are often referred to as the three poisons, as they are the root causes of much of the suffering we experience in life. Greed is an intense desire or attachment to material possessions, people, or experiences. It stems from a sense of lack, a belief that we are incomplete unless we acquire what we crave. This can lead to constant dissatisfaction because once we attain what we desire, new desires arise, trapping us in an endless cycle of wanting. Hatred or anger is the opposite of greed in many ways. It manifests as aversion, the desire to push away or destroy what we dislike. This emotion can easily take over the mind, causing us to act in ways that harm others and ourselves. When driven by hatred, we often say or do things we later regret, deepening our own suffering and the suffering of those around us. Delusion is the most insidious of the three poisons. It is a distorted perception of reality, a misunderstanding of the true nature of life. Delusion makes us see permanence where there is impermanence, satisfaction where there is only fleeting pleasure, and a solid, unchanging self where there is none. This ignorance of the true nature of things keeps us bound in the cycle of birth and death, known as samsara. When these three poisons take hold of the mind, they distort our thoughts and perceptions, leading to actions that generate suffering. The more entrenched we become in greed, hatred, and delusion, the more our minds are filled with negativity, and the more we perpetuate the cycle of suffering. How suffering follows the impure mind. The Buddha's metaphor of the ox and the cart perfectly encapsulates the inescapability of suffering when our actions are driven by an impure mind. Just as the ox, no matter how hard it tries, cannot outpace the cart it pulls, so too are we unable to escape the consequences of our actions. This is the law of karma, the principle that every action we take, every word we speak, and even every thought we entertain creates ripples that shape our future experiences. Let's explore this in greater detail. The chain of cause and effect. Every thought or emotion we have leads to a specific action or speech. When our minds are filled with greed, we act selfishly, often at the expense of others. We may hoard resources, manipulate people for personal gain, or engage in unethical behavior to achieve our desires. These actions might bring temporary satisfaction, but they inevitably lead to negative consequences. Greed isolates us, alienates others, and creates a sense of emptiness that no amount of material wealth or pleasure can fill. Moreover, the stress and anxiety that come from clinging to possessions or status only deepen our suffering. Similarly, when we act out of hatred or anger, we create suffering for ourselves and others. Anger is often impulsive. It causes us to speak harshly, harm those we care about, or make decisions we regret. While acting on anger might feel justified in the heat of the moment, the aftermath is usually filled with guilt, regret, and damaged relationships. Like the ox pulling the cart, we cannot escape the consequences of our actions, even if we feel momentarily empowered by our outbursts. Delusion is perhaps the most dangerous of the three poisons because it clouds our perception of reality. When we act out of delusion, we fail to see the true nature of our situation. For example, we might chase after impermanent pleasures, believing that they will bring lasting happiness, or we might cling to a false sense of self, leading us to protect our ego at all costs. Delusion keeps us trapped in cycles of suffering because we do not see the harm we are causing to ourselves and others. Mental suffering and its consequences. Beyond the external consequences of our actions, an impure mind causes significant internal suffering. When our minds are filled with greed, hatred, or delusion, we experience constant dissatisfaction, anxiety, and inner turmoil. Greed drives us to want more, no matter how much we already have. Anger fills us with bitterness and resentment, making it difficult to find peace. Delusion keeps us trapped in ignorance, unable to understand the causes of our suffering or how to escape them. This internal suffering manifests in various ways. We may feel restless, unable to enjoy the present moment because our minds are constantly preoccupied with what we lack or what we fear. We may experience heightened stress and anxiety as we cling to impermanent things, whether they be relationships, possessions, or social status, knowing deep down that they will eventually change or disappear. Our relationships with others may become strained as we act out of selfishness or anger, pushing people away and isolating ourselves in the process. Furthermore, an impure mind creates an environment of distrust and defensiveness. When we are driven by greed or hatred, we view others as competitors or threats, rather than as fellow human beings who also seek happiness and avoid suffering. This perspective leads to conflict, division, and loneliness, deepening the suffering we experience. The long-term effects of impurity. In Buddhist thought, the consequences of an impure mind are not limited to this lifetime. The law of karma extends beyond death, influencing our future existences. When we act out of greed, hatred, or delusion, we create negative karma that can carry over into future lives. According to Buddhist teachings, this karmic residue shapes our future circumstances, determining whether we will be born into fortunate or unfortunate conditions. For example, someone who cultivates a life of greed and selfishness may be reborn into circumstances where they experience extreme poverty or deprivation, as their past actions have created the conditions for suffering. Similarly, those who act out of hatred may find themselves in environments of conflict or hostility in future lives. The Buddha taught that the cycle of samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, is driven by the impurities of the mind. As long as we remain caught in the grip of greed, hatred, and delusion, we continue to generate karma that keeps us bound to the cycle of suffering. Real-life examples of mental impurity. To better understand how an impure mind leads to suffering, let's consider some real-life examples. The case of unchecked greed. Imagine a successful businessperson who constantly seeks more wealth and power. This individual manipulates others, engages in unethical practices, and disregards the well-being of employees and competitors. Over time, their relationships deteriorate. Friends and family begin to distance themselves, seeing this person as someone who only values them for what they can provide. Despite accumulating great wealth, the businessperson feels increasingly isolated and dissatisfied. The more they achieve, the more they feel the need to acquire. Eventually, the stress of maintaining this wealth and the loneliness of alienating loved ones begin to take a toll on their mental and physical health. This is a clear example of how greed leads to suffering, both externally through broken relationships and stress, and internally through dissatisfaction and anxiety. The impact of anger. Consider someone who has a short temper. Whenever they are faced with a difficult situation, they lash out at others, blaming them for their frustration. Over time, their anger causes them to lose friendships, strain their marriage, and create a hostile work environment. While each outburst might provide a temporary release of emotion, the long-term consequences are devastating. They find themselves lonely and bitter, unable to form meaningful connections because their anger keeps driving people away. This is how hatred and anger can lead to a life of suffering, isolating the individual from the love and support they crave. The trap of delusion. Finally, think of someone who is caught in a delusion about their own importance. This person constantly seeks validation and praise from others, believing that their worth is tied to their social status. They spend enormous amounts of energy crafting a perfect image on social media, curating their life to appear successful and happy. However, beneath the surface, they feel empty and unfulfilled. The constant need for approval becomes a source of anxiety, as they fear losing their status or being exposed as a fraud. This is the suffering caused by delusion, living in a false reality that ultimately leads to disappointment and despair. Breaking free from the cycle of suffering. Although the consequences of an impure mind are serious, the Buddhist teachings offer a way out of this cycle of suffering. Through mindfulness, ethical conduct, and meditation, we can begin to purify the mind and transform the way we interact with the world. By cultivating awareness of our thoughts and emotions, we can prevent the poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion from taking hold. The practice of mindfulness allows us to observe our mental states without being consumed by them. When anger arises, we can acknowledge it and choose not to act on it. When greed tempts us, we can recognize its fleeting nature and let it pass. Over time, this practice leads to a more peaceful, compassionate, and wise way of living. By following the Buddha's path, we can stop the wheel of suffering from following us. Instead of being driven by the impurities of the mind, we can cultivate a life of clarity, kindness, and inner peace. Cultivating a pure mind, the path to inner peace. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha teaches that a pure mind is the key to breaking the cycle of suffering and achieving lasting peace. The mind, when filled with wholesome, virtuous qualities, creates the conditions for happiness and well-being. On the other hand, an impure mind, one filled with anger, greed, jealousy, or ignorance, inevitably leads to suffering. But how do we go about cultivating a pure mind in the midst of life's challenges, distractions, and daily pressures? The path to a pure mind is rooted in mindfulness, meditation, and ethical conduct, practices that transform our mental and emotional states from chaos into clarity. Understanding the nature of the mind. The first step toward cultivating a pure mind is to understand the mind itself. According to Buddhist teachings, the mind is constantly changing. It is influenced by our thoughts, emotions, and external circumstances. Just as a mirror reflects whatever is placed before it, the mind reflects whatever thoughts and feelings arise within it. The Buddha taught that our minds are like a garden. If we nurture the garden with care, it will flourish, but if we neglect it or allow it to be overrun with weeds, it will become tangled and chaotic. This metaphor helps us recognize that the mind is not fixed, it can be trained and transformed. We are not helpless victims of our thoughts and emotions, rather, we can actively cultivate a mind that is clear, compassionate, and wise. However, just as a garden requires consistent attention and effort, so too does the mind require ongoing care to purify it from the negative tendencies that lead to suffering. Mindfulness, the foundation of mental purity. One of the most important tools for purifying the mind is mindfulness, or sati in Pali. Mindfulness is the practice of being fully present in the moment, aware of our thoughts, emotions, and sensations without judgment. It allows us to observe our mental states as they arise, rather than being swept away by them. In the absence of mindfulness, we often react automatically to situations based on habitual patterns of thought and emotion. If someone says something hurtful, for example, we might react with anger or resentment without even realizing it. But when we practice mindfulness, we develop the ability to pause and observe our reactions. We can recognize the anger as it arises and choose not to act on it. In this way, mindfulness creates a space between stimulus and response, a space in which we can choose a more skillful, compassionate course of action. The Buddha emphasized that mindfulness is essential for purifying the mind because it helps us become aware of the mental states that lead to suffering. Without mindfulness, we might not even realize that we are acting out of greed, anger, or ignorance. We may find ourselves caught in a cycle of harmful behavior, unaware that our own mental states are the cause of our suffering. But with mindfulness, we can recognize these negative mental states as they arise and take steps to counteract them before they lead to harmful actions. The practice of mindfulness in daily life. While mindfulness is often associated with formal meditation practice, it is also something we can cultivate in our everyday lives. The Buddha taught that mindfulness should be practiced in all aspects of life, in our thoughts, words, and actions. This means being fully present and aware, not just when we are meditating, but in everything we do. For example, when we are eating, we can practice mindful eating by paying full attention to the experience of eating. Instead of eating quickly or while distracted by other tasks, we can focus on the taste, texture, and aroma of the food, appreciating each bite with awareness. This simple practice helps us become more present and grounded, and it also allows us to notice the thoughts and emotions that arise during the act of eating. Do we eat mindlessly out of boredom or stress? Do we eat in a hurry, without savoring the experience? By bringing mindfulness to the act of eating, we gain insight into our habits and patterns, and we can begin to make more conscious choices about how we nourish our bodies and minds. Similarly, we can practice mindfulness in our interactions with others. When we are engaged in conversation, we can make an effort to be fully present with the person we are speaking to, listening attentively and without distraction. We can observe our own mental reactions during the conversation. Are we judging the other person? Are we waiting for our turn to speak without truly listening? By practicing mindful communication, we can cultivate greater empathy, patience, and understanding in our relationships. Mindfulness can also be practiced in moments of difficulty or stress. When we are faced with a challenging situation, instead of reacting impulsively, we can pause and bring our attention to the present moment. By observing our thoughts and emotions with mindfulness, we can respond to the situation with greater clarity and wisdom, rather than being driven by fear, anger, or frustration. Meditation. Training the mind. In addition to mindfulness, meditation is a powerful practice for purifying the mind. While mindfulness can be practiced in any moment, meditation provides a structured space in which we can train the mind to remain focused, calm, and clear. The Buddha taught that meditation is essential for developing insight into the nature of the mind and for freeing ourselves from the mental habits that lead to suffering. One of the most common forms of meditation in Buddhist practice is samatha, calm abiding meditation. In this practice, we focus the mind on a single object, such as the breath, a candle flame, or a mantra, in order to cultivate concentration and mental stability. By training the mind to remain focused on one point, we develop the ability to let go of distractions and mental chatter. Over time, this practice helps us create a calm and peaceful mind, free from the constant turbulence of thoughts and emotions. Another important form of meditation is vipassana, insight meditation, which involves observing the nature of our thoughts and emotions as they arise and pass away. In this practice, we do not attempt to control or suppress our thoughts. Instead, we simply observe them with non-attachment and non-judgment. As we watch our thoughts come and go, we begin to see their impermanent nature and realize that we are not defined by them. This insight helps us let go of attachment to our thoughts and emotions, which is a key step in freeing the mind from suffering. Loving kindness meditation. Cultivating positive mental states. In addition to mindfulness and insight meditation, the Buddha also taught metta bhavana, or loving kindness meditation, as a way to cultivate positive mental states. Loving kindness meditation involves sending thoughts of love, compassion, and goodwill to ourselves and others. This practice helps us replace negative emotions like anger and jealousy with feelings of kindness and empathy. Loving kindness meditation typically begins by focusing on ourselves. We start by silently repeating phrases such as, "May I be happy," "May I be healthy," or, "May I be at peace." By directing these compassionate thoughts toward ourselves, we cultivate self-love and self-compassion, which are essential for purifying the mind. Many people struggle with feelings of self-criticism, self-doubt, or unworthiness, and these negative mental states can lead to suffering. Through loving kindness meditation, we can learn to treat ourselves with the same kindness and compassion that we would offer to a dear friend. After sending loving kindness to ourselves, we extend it to others, beginning with those we care about and gradually expanding to include all beings. We silently repeat phrases such as, "May you be happy," "May you be free from suffering," and "May you live with ease." This practice helps to dissolve feelings of anger, resentment, or judgment toward others and fosters a sense of connection and compassion. Over time, loving-kindness meditation transforms the mind by replacing negative mental states with positive, wholesome ones. Ethical conduct is the foundation for mental purity. While mindfulness and meditation are essential practices for purifying the mind, they must be supported by ethical conduct, or sila. The Buddha taught that ethical conduct provides the foundation for mental clarity and inner peace. If we engage in harmful actions, such as lying, stealing, or causing harm to others, it becomes difficult to cultivate a pure mind, because our actions create mental disturbances and lead to guilt, fear, and anxiety. The Buddha's teachings on ethical conduct are summarized in the 5 precepts, which serve as guidelines for living a moral and virtuous life. Refraining from killing or causing harm to living beings. This precept encourages us to practice non-violence and compassion toward all forms of life. Refraining from taking what is not given. This precept encourages honesty and respect for the possessions and rights of others. Refraining from sexual misconduct. This precept encourages respect for the boundaries and dignity of others in our relationships. Refraining from false speech. This precept encourages truthfulness and integrity in our communication. Refraining from intoxicants that cloud the mind. This precept encourages mental clarity and mindfulness by avoiding substances that impair judgment and awareness. By following these precepts, we create the conditions for mental purity. When we live in alignment with ethical principles, our minds become more peaceful, because we are not weighed down by the consequences of harmful actions. Ethical conduct also helps to create a harmonious and compassionate society, in which all beings can flourish. The gradual process of mental purification. Cultivating a pure mind is not something that happens overnight. It is a gradual process that requires consistent practice and dedication. The Buddha likened the process of mental purification to the work of a goldsmith refining gold. Just as the goldsmith must repeatedly heat, hammer, and polish the gold to remove impurities, we must repeatedly observe, reflect, and meditate to purify the mind of defilements. At times, the process may feel difficult or slow, but it is important to remember that every step we take on the path to mental purity brings us closer to inner peace. Each moment of mindfulness, each act of compassion, and each meditation session contributes to the gradual transformation of the mind. Over time, we begin to notice a shift in our mental and emotional states. Negative emotions become less frequent and less intense, while positive qualities like kindness, patience, and equanimity begin to grow. As the mind becomes more pure, we experience a deepening sense of inner peace and well-being. The wheel of suffering no longer follows us, because we are no longer driven by the mental defilements that once caused us to act out of ignorance and desire. Instead, we find ourselves living with greater wisdom, compassion, and clarity, free from the turmoil of unwholesome thoughts and emotions. The power of a pure mind. The path to a pure mind is a path to freedom from suffering. By cultivating mindfulness, practicing meditation, and living ethically, we can transform our minds and, in turn, transform our lives. The Buddha's teachings remind us that the mind is both the source of suffering and the key to liberation. When we train the mind, purify it of defilements, and fill it with compassion and wisdom, we create the conditions for true happiness and peace. The path to liberation. Breaking the cycle of suffering. The teachings of the Buddha reveal that the cycle of suffering is not a predetermined fate but rather a result of our thoughts and actions. Liberation is possible through understanding the mind's nature and learning how to transform it. This journey is guided by the realization that suffering arises from the impurities of the mind, while happiness and peace come from cultivating a pure mind. Understanding the cycle of suffering. At the heart of the Buddha's teachings is the concept of samsara, the continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth driven by ignorance and craving. In this cycle, our experiences are shaped by our mental states. The Four Noble Truths articulate this cycle, outlining the reality of suffering, its origins, the possibility of cessation, and the path leading to that cessation. The truth of suffering, dukkha. Life is characterized by suffering, whether it manifests as physical pain, emotional distress, or existential dissatisfaction. This suffering is universal and can take many forms, from the fleeting nature of pleasure to the inevitable reality of loss and change. The truth of the origin of suffering, samudaya. The root cause of suffering lies in our desires and attachments, specifically, the clinging to impermanent things. Our minds are often clouded by greed, hatred, and ignorance, leading us to pursue temporary pleasures and to resist discomfort. The truth of the cessation of suffering, nirodha. The possibility of liberation exists. By relinquishing attachment and cultivating understanding, we can attain a state of peace known as nibbana, nirvana, where suffering ceases entirely. The truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, magga. The Buddha outlined the Eightfold Path as a practical guide for achieving liberation. This path encompasses right understanding, intention, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. By recognizing these truths and applying them, we can begin to dismantle the cycle of suffering that keeps us trapped. The role of the Eightfold Path in transformation. The Eightfold Path serves as a framework for mental transformation. Each aspect of the path supports the others, creating a holistic approach to cultivating a pure mind. Let's delve deeper into each element and explore how they work together to liberate us from suffering. Right view. This initial step involves understanding the nature of reality, particularly the Four Noble Truths and the impermanence of all things. By cultivating right view, we begin to see things as they truly are, rather than through the distorted lens of our desires and fears. This insight fosters wisdom and helps us to respond to life's challenges with clarity. Right intention. Once we understand the nature of reality, we can set intentions aligned with compassion and non-attachment. Right intention involves developing thoughts of goodwill, renunciation of harmful desires, and harmlessness. It is a commitment to acting in ways that promote the welfare of ourselves and others. Right speech. Speech has the power to uplift or harm. Practicing right speech means communicating truthfully, kindly, and helpfully. This practice encourages us to refrain from lying, gossiping, or using hurtful words. By fostering healthy communication, we create a more supportive environment for ourselves and those around us. Right action. Right action translates our intentions into deeds. It involves acting ethically and morally by refraining from actions that cause harm, such as killing, stealing, and engaging in sexual misconduct. When our actions are rooted in compassion and respect, we cultivate harmony in our relationships and reduce the likelihood of suffering. Right livelihood. This principle encourages us to pursue work that does not harm others or ourselves. Choosing a livelihood that promotes well-being, whether through ethical business practices, service, or creative expression, aligns our work with our values and supports our journey toward liberation. Right effort. Cultivating a pure mind requires diligence and determination. Right effort involves the commitment to eliminate negative mental states and to cultivate positive qualities. This may involve recognizing when unwholesome thoughts arise and consciously redirecting our focus toward kindness, compassion, and understanding. Right mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of being fully present in each moment. By developing awareness of our thoughts, emotions, and actions, we can identify unwholesome patterns and disrupt the cycle of suffering. Mindfulness fosters a sense of clarity and allows us to respond skillfully rather than react impulsively. Right concentration. This aspect of the path involves developing the ability to focus the mind through meditation. Concentration enables us to deepen our understanding of our mental states and gain insight into the nature of suffering. Through meditation, we cultivate a sense of inner peace and stability, making it easier to navigate the complexities of life. Together, these 8 elements of the path provide a comprehensive approach to transforming the mind. By committing to this journey, we can break free from the patterns that keep us trapped in suffering. Practical steps to implement the path. While the Eightfold Path provides a theoretical framework, the real challenge lies in applying these teachings to our daily lives. Here are some practical steps for integrating these principles into our everyday experience. Cultivating awareness. Start by developing mindfulness in simple activities, such as eating, walking, or even breathing. Pay attention to your thoughts and emotions without judgment. This practice of awareness creates a foundation for recognizing when unwholesome thoughts arise. Setting intentions. Each morning, take a moment to set positive intentions for the day. Consider how you want to respond to challenges and opportunities. Intentions can guide your actions and help you remain focused on cultivating a pure mind. Practicing kind speech. Before speaking, ask yourself if your words are truthful, kind, and necessary. This simple check can transform your interactions and contribute to a more harmonious environment. Engaging in ethical action. Reflect on your actions daily. Consider whether they align with your values and the impact they have on others. Strive to engage in actions that promote well-being and kindness. Choosing right livelihood. Assess your work and its impact on yourself and others. Explore ways to align your career with your values, seeking opportunities that promote ethical practices and contribute positively to society. Dedication to effort. Recognize when negative thoughts arise and consciously redirect your attention. Practice letting go of harmful emotions, replacing them with positive qualities like compassion and gratitude. Developing mindfulness practices. Incorporate mindfulness meditation into your daily routine. Even a few minutes of focused breathing or loving-kindness meditation can foster a sense of inner peace and clarity. Deepening concentration. Explore different meditation techniques to enhance your concentration. Find a practice that resonates with you, whether it's focused attention, open awareness, or guided visualization. By actively engaging with these practices, we can gradually dismantle the mental barriers that contribute to suffering, allowing for a more peaceful existence. The journey toward Nibbana. The ultimate goal of following the Eightfold Path is to attain Nibbana, a state of perfect peace and liberation from the cycle of samsara. Nibbana is not merely an escape from suffering but a profound transformation of consciousness. It represents the end of craving, ignorance, and delusion, the roots of all suffering. Reaching Nibbana requires dedication, self-awareness, and the willingness to confront our inner landscapes. It involves recognizing and letting go of attachments, whether to material possessions, relationships, or even ideas about ourselves. This process is often challenging, as it requires a radical shift in perspective and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. However, the journey toward Nibbana is one of immense beauty and reward. As we work to purify our minds and let go of suffering, we begin to experience profound joy, compassion, and connection to all beings. This state of liberation is characterized by an inner peace that is unaffected by external circumstances. Reflections on the path. As we navigate the complexities of life, the teachings of the Buddha offer us a roadmap for transformation. By understanding the nature of the mind and cultivating a pure mental state, we can break free from the cycle of suffering. The Eightfold Path serves as a practical guide, helping us to align our thoughts, words, and actions with our highest values. It is essential to remember that the path to liberation is not a destination but a continuous journey. Each step we take brings us closer to understanding ourselves and the nature of reality. Embracing this journey with curiosity and compassion allows us to grow and evolve. Through mindfulness, ethical conduct, and the cultivation of wisdom, we can create a life marked by peace, joy, and meaningful connections. As we learn to master our minds, we not only transform our own lives but also contribute to the well-being of those around us. Ultimately, the teachings of the Dhammapada remind us that the power to shape our reality lies within us. By nurturing a pure mind, we can break free from the wheel of suffering and experience the true freedom and happiness that come from living in harmony with ourselves and the world. Practical wisdom for daily life. The teachings of the Buddha on the nature of the mind and its role in shaping our experiences are profoundly practical. They provide us with tools to navigate our daily lives with mindfulness, compassion, and intention. By applying these teachings, we can transform not only our internal states but also our interactions with the world around us. The verse from the Dhammapada serves as a guiding principle, reminding us that the quality of our thoughts directly influences our actions and the outcomes we experience. Mindful speech and action. One of the most immediate applications of the Buddha's teachings is in our communication. The way we speak can either build bridges or create barriers. Mindful speech involves being aware of the impact our words have on others. This practice encourages us to ask ourselves 3 critical questions before we speak. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? When we filter our words through these questions, we cultivate a sense of responsibility for our speech. For example, if we feel the urge to gossip about a colleague, we can pause and reflect. Is sharing this information truthful? Will it bring kindness to the conversation, or will it cause harm? Often, choosing silence or a more constructive response will lead to better outcomes for ourselves and others. Mindful action complements this practice. Every choice we make, from small daily decisions to significant life choices, can either contribute to our suffering or promote peace. For instance, consider the simple act of choosing whether to help someone in need. If we act out of kindness and compassion, we not only alleviate someone else's suffering but also cultivate positive feelings within ourselves. Conversely, ignoring an opportunity to help may lead to feelings of regret or guilt, feeding our own suffering. Cultivating gratitude. Another powerful practice that aligns with the Buddha's teachings is gratitude. By actively acknowledging and appreciating the positive aspects of our lives, we shift our focus from what we lack to what we have. This shift in perspective fosters a more peaceful mind and diminishes feelings of discontent. Each day, take a moment to reflect on 3 things for which you are grateful. They can be as simple as a warm cup of tea, a smile from a stranger, or the support of a friend. By consciously recognizing these moments, we train our minds to focus on positivity, which can help counteract the negativity that often arises from our thoughts. Meditation, a daily practice. Incorporating meditation into our daily routines can profoundly affect our mental clarity and emotional resilience. Even just a few minutes of mindfulness meditation can help us cultivate awareness of our thoughts and feelings. As we become more attuned to our mental states, we can better identify when negative emotions arise, allowing us to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. To begin a meditation practice, find a quiet space where you won't be disturbed. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and take a few deep breaths. Focus on your breath, allowing your mind to settle. When thoughts arise, whether they are about the past, future, or distractions, acknowledge them without judgment and gently bring your attention back to your breath. This practice helps us develop a non-reactive awareness that carries over into our daily interactions. Compassionate action. Compassion is a central tenet of Buddhist practice, and it can be cultivated through intentional actions in our everyday lives. When faced with challenges, whether personal or in our interactions with others, approaching the situation with compassion allows us to respond with understanding rather than anger or frustration. For instance, if a friend is upset and lashes out, we can choose to respond with compassion rather than defensiveness. Instead of taking their words personally, we can recognize that their anger may stem from their own suffering. By offering support and understanding, we not only help them but also create a more harmonious environment. Engaging in acts of kindness, both big and small, can also enhance our sense of connection with others. Simple gestures, such as holding the door for someone, offering a compliment, or volunteering our time for a cause we care about, foster a sense of community and belonging. These actions create ripples of positivity that can uplift both ourselves and those around us. Mindfulness in daily activities. Mindfulness can be woven into every aspect of our lives. Whether we are eating, walking, or even doing household chores, we can practice being fully present in the moment. For example, During a meal, instead of mindlessly consuming food while distracted by screens or conversations, we can take the time to savor each bite. Notice the flavors, textures, and aromas of the food. This practice not only enhances our enjoyment of meals but also promotes better digestion and appreciation for nourishment. Walking mindfully is another effective way to incorporate mindfulness into daily life. Instead of rushing from one place to another, we can focus on each step we take. Feel the ground beneath our feet, notice the rhythm of our breath, and observe the sights and sounds around us. This practice cultivates a deeper sense of connection to our surroundings and helps ground us in the present moment. Building resilience through reflection. In addition to cultivating mindfulness and compassion, reflection plays a vital role in personal growth. Taking time to reflect on our experiences, decisions, and interactions allows us to gain insights into our patterns of thought and behavior. Keeping a journal can be a powerful tool for this practice. Writing down our thoughts and feelings can help us process experiences and identify areas for improvement. After a challenging day, consider journaling about the moments that caused frustration or sadness. Reflect on how those moments made you feel and how you responded. This practice can help us recognize triggers and patterns in our behavior, empowering us to respond differently in the future. The power of community. Engaging with a community of like-minded individuals can enhance our journey toward a more mindful and compassionate life. Participating in group meditations, discussions, or workshops allows us to learn from others, share our experiences, and cultivate a sense of belonging. When we surround ourselves with individuals who support our growth, we create an environment that fosters positive change. Many communities offer resources such as classes on mindfulness, meditation, or the Buddhist teachings. Exploring these opportunities can deepen our understanding and practice while also connecting us to others who share similar aspirations. Embracing impermanence. One of the most profound lessons in Buddhism is the concept of impermanence. Recognizing that all things, both good and bad, are transient can help us cultivate a more balanced perspective on life. When faced with challenges, remind yourself that they are temporary. Embracing this understanding can alleviate suffering and foster resilience. For instance, if we experience a setback, instead of dwelling on it, we can acknowledge it as part of life's ebb and flow. By accepting impermanence, we become more adaptable and open to new possibilities. This shift in mindset allows us to navigate difficulties with greater ease and encourages us to savor joyful moments without clinging to them. Integrating the teachings into everyday life. Ultimately, the teachings of the Buddha on the mind and its power are not confined to meditation cushions or sacred texts. They are meant to be integrated into our daily lives, guiding our thoughts, words, and actions. By making conscious choices rooted in mindfulness and compassion, we can break the cycle of suffering and cultivate a life filled with meaning, connection, and joy. In our busy lives, it's easy to get swept away by distractions and negativity. However, by consistently practicing mindfulness, compassionate action, and gratitude, we create a solid foundation for a more peaceful existence. Each small step we take in this direction contributes to our overall well-being and the well-being of those around us. A call to action. As we reflect on the teachings of the Dhammapada and the wisdom of the Buddha, let us commit to being more mindful in our lives. Start with one small change today, whether it's practicing mindful speech, incorporating meditation into your routine, or performing an act of kindness. Notice how these actions affect your mind and your relationships. The journey toward a pure mind is ongoing, and each day presents new opportunities for growth and transformation. By taking responsibility for our thoughts and actions, we can truly change the course of our lives. The wheel of suffering does not have to follow us. Instead, we can cultivate a life of peace, joy, and fulfillment. As we walk this path together, may we support one another in our efforts to embody the teachings of the Buddha, allowing our minds to lead us toward liberation and true happiness. Conclusion. The power of the mind. The teachings of the Dhammapada illuminate the profound impact that the mind has on our lives. The verse, "Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought," serves as a powerful reminder that our thoughts shape our reality in ways we may not fully realize. The mind is not just a passive observer, it is an active creator, molding our experiences and perceptions. By understanding and harnessing this power, we can navigate the complexities of life with greater clarity and purpose. The nature of the mind, a double-edged sword. The mind is often described in Buddhist teachings as both a friend and an enemy. It has the capacity to generate incredible beauty, compassion, and wisdom, yet it can also be a source of suffering, confusion, and turmoil. This dual nature of the mind underscores the importance of mental discipline and mindfulness. When our minds are untrained, we may find ourselves at the mercy of our thoughts and emotions, reacting impulsively and creating suffering for ourselves and others. On the other hand, when we cultivate mindfulness and awareness, we begin to see the mind for what it truly is, a collection of thoughts, feelings, and perceptions that are ever-changing and impermanent. This realization is liberating. It allows us to detach from harmful mental patterns and to cultivate a sense of agency over our lives. We become the architects of our reality, capable of choosing thoughts that lead to peace and happiness rather than suffering. The importance of mindfulness. Mindfulness is the key to unlocking the potential of the mind. It is the practice of bringing our attention to the present moment, observing our thoughts and feelings without judgment. Through mindfulness, we gain insight into the workings of our minds, recognizing that thoughts are not inherently true or fixed. They arise, change, and pass away, much like clouds drifting across the sky. This perspective is crucial for breaking free from the cycle of suffering. When we are mindful, we can notice when negative thoughts arise, such as anger, fear, or jealousy, and choose not to act on them. Instead of being swept away by these emotions, we can observe them with curiosity and compassion. This practice helps us to cultivate a sense of inner peace and resilience, allowing us to respond to life's challenges with wisdom rather than reactivity. Transforming the mind. The role of meditation. Meditation is an essential tool for cultivating a pure mind. Through regular practice, we train the mind to be more focused, calm, and resilient. Meditation allows us to develop a deeper understanding of our thoughts and emotions, recognizing them as temporary states rather than defining aspects of our identity. One of the most transformative aspects of meditation is the cultivation of loving-kindness metta. In metta meditation, we intentionally generate feelings of love and compassion toward ourselves and others. This practice not only purifies our minds but also creates a ripple effect in our relationships and interactions. As we cultivate kindness within ourselves, we are more likely to extend that kindness to others, fostering a sense of connection and harmony in our communities. Moreover, meditation enhances our capacity for concentration and focus. In a world filled with distractions, the ability to direct our attention is a precious skill. When we can concentrate our minds, we can engage more fully in our tasks, connect deeply with others, and approach challenges with clarity and purpose. Ethical living. Aligning thoughts and actions. The power of the mind is further amplified when we align our thoughts with ethical living. The Buddha's teachings on the Eightfold Path provide a framework for living in a way that supports the cultivation of a pure mind. By practicing right speech, right action, and right livelihood, we create a foundation of ethical conduct that nurtures our mental well-being. When our actions are rooted in compassion and integrity, we experience less inner conflict and turmoil. For example, speaking truthfully and kindly fosters trust and connection in our relationships, while acting ethically brings a sense of peace and satisfaction. Living in alignment with our values not only purifies our minds but also contributes to the well-being of those around us. The ripple effect of a pure mind. The impact of a pure mind extends beyond our individual experiences. As we cultivate peace and compassion within ourselves, we contribute to a more harmonious world. Our thoughts and actions influence those around us, creating a ripple effect that can inspire others to embark on their own journeys of transformation. In this interconnected world, the importance of our mental states cannot be overstated. When we choose to respond to life with kindness and understanding, we help to break the cycle of suffering that often perpetuates negativity and discord. We become beacons of hope and compassion, showing others that a different way of being is possible. Embracing the journey of transformation. The journey toward a pure mind is ongoing and requires dedication, practice, and patience. There will be challenges and setbacks along the way, but each moment presents an opportunity for growth. By embracing the process of transformation, we can learn to approach our thoughts and emotions with curiosity and compassion rather than judgment. It is essential to remember that perfection is not the goal. Instead, the aim is to cultivate awareness and understanding. We are all human, and we will experience a range of emotions and thoughts throughout our lives. What matters is how we respond to these experiences. With mindfulness, we can learn to navigate the ups and downs of life with grace and resilience. A call to action. As we conclude this exploration of the mind's power, I invite you to take action in your own life. Begin by integrating mindfulness into your daily routine. Set aside a few moments each day to observe your thoughts and feelings without judgment. Experiment with meditation practices that resonate with you, and cultivate loving kindness for yourself and others. Pay attention to how your mental states influence your interactions with the world. Challenge yourself to speak and act from a place of compassion and integrity. Notice the impact this has on your relationships and overall well-being. Remember that small, consistent efforts can lead to significant transformations over time. In closing, the power of the mind is both a gift and a responsibility. As we cultivate awareness, compassion, and ethical living, we not only transform our own lives but also contribute to the greater good of humanity. The journey of the mind is a journey toward liberation, a path that invites us to awaken to our true potential and to live fully in the present moment. Embrace this journey, and discover the profound peace and happiness that arise from a pure mind. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's reading and found it inspiring. We look forward to seeing you next time as we continue our journey through the teachings of the Buddha. Your presence means a lot to us, and we can't wait to share more wisdom with you. Until then, take care and stay mindful.